Most people think buying a good property just means something that's in nice condition. No cracks in the walls, no leaky roof. But let me tell you about Jenny. She spent $700,000 on what she thought was a great property. 5 years later, that property had barely risen $15,000. Meanwhile, other properties bought at the same time had jumped by hundreds of thousands of dollars. She lost out on over $300,000, not because she didn't buy, but because she bought the wrong property. Now, I've been investing myself for over 23 years, and over the past 9 years, I've helped hundreds of people avoid mistakes like this. And here's what I can tell you. Buying the wrong type of property will quietly drain your wealth, while buying the right type of property can change your life. So today, I'm going to show you the best kinds of properties to buy in 2025, why they are the only types of property worth owning if you're serious about building wealth, and the simple way to spot them before anyone else does. Now, here's what most people get wrong. Most people think a good property just means something in good condition with no maintenance hassles. Now, that might feel safe, but it doesn't determine whether the property actually grows in value. Remember Jenny from earlier? She learned this the hard way. She bought a $700,000 property that looked perfect in her mind. It was in good condition. It was in an area she was familiar with, an area she thought was a good area. Yet after 5 years, it only grew $15,000. Meanwhile, if she'd bought the right type of property for the same $700,000 price, it would easily have been worth over $1 million. So while I call these the best types of properties to buy, if you're serious about building wealth through property, in my opinion, these are the only types of property to buy. And what are they? Well, you need to buy the kinds of properties where there is more demand from owner-occupiers relative to the number of properties available for sale. Now, what does that actually mean though? Well, first of all, forget about what you want to live in. Forget about what you might think is a good property or what amenities you would want to be close to. Instead, focus on what owner-occupiers in that suburb want to live in. That's the filter that separates a property that just looks good from one that actually builds wealth. Now, let's talk about why this principle is so important. And look, just before we move on, if you're thinking about buying an investment property in 2025, don't do it blindly. We've put together a free ebook that covers the essential checks we use with every client before they commit to a property. And you can grab your copy totally for free using the link in the description. Now, here's what most investors do not realize. It's owner-occupiers who drive the market. It's not we as investors. Investors don't create capital growth. It's owner-occupiers who drive capital growth. Many investors believe any property in a good area will rise in value. They don't stop to ask whether the property actually matches what owner-occupiers in that suburb want. To continue Jenny's story from earlier on, when she came to us for help, we focused on owner-occupier demand. Within just 1 year, the property that we helped her buy had risen in value by over $100,000. She made more in 12 months with the right property than in 5 years trying to buy a property on her own. Another example, I know someone who bought an apartment in a leafy Sydney suburb. Beautiful suburb. On paper, it looked like a very safe, attractive buy. But 7 years later, the property had barely moved in value and he struggled many times to find a tenant. Why? Because in that suburb, owner-occupiers wanted larger, freestanding 4 and 5 bedroom homes, not apartments, and especially in this case, a penthouse apartment. Now on the flip side, compare that to say Sydney's Northern Beaches. Apartments there have performed really well because that's what many locals actually want to buy and live in. there's also limited supply. So more demand from owner-occupiers for apartments in the northern beaches versus the available supply. But then compare that to the Docklands in Melbourne or say Wentworthville in Sydney. Apartments haven't performed the same way as houses. The difference always comes back to owner-occupier demand. This is why owner-occupiers are the single most important factor in choosing a property. They drive the market. They're the ones paying the premiums. They're the ones competing the hardest and setting suburb values. That's why it's always important to know who is buying property in an area that you're targeting. This even matters if you're thinking about buying a property in a particular area and you're like, oh, that area has risen in value so much. Maybe you're going to be buying at the end of that property boom. And are you buying too late? Well, that's a common question we're seeing right now. And the question again is answered by asking who is buying. If there are more owner-occupiers, especially people from out of that area moving into the area to buy property to live, then there is still strong demand. And as long as that demand is greater than supply, and you can easily tell that by doing your on-the-ground research and seeing how many people are attending open homes, how many people are at auctions, how many offers are being made on property. Because if there are multiple offers, more groups attending open homes, multiple people attending auctions, that clearly tells you there is more demand from owner-occupiers, and that is more than likely going to point towards continued price rises, regardless of how much a property or an area might have risen in value in the past. Now, you might be thinking, all right, Nero, all this owner-occupied demand sounds great, but I want my property to get rented. I want strong tenant demand as well. Well, here's the key that so many investors fail to understand. Tenants usually want what owner-occupiers want. I mean, think about it for a moment. If you're buying in an area where there's mainly young families who are looking to move into the area to live, well, then what will an owner-occupier want? Well, first of all, they're going to want to avoid living on a busy road. They're probably going to want to live close to the schools, close to key amenities. But then, if tenants are also young families, isn't that what they would want to live in as well? Now, I stumbled on this purely by accident. One of my first properties that I bought back 20 odd years ago, after 6 years, I found out that I had the same set of tenants in that particular property. I was like, that's unusual. And yet when I looked into it further, it became so blatantly obvious. I'd chosen a property in a good area and the property was quite close to the local primary school. My tenants were there for 6 years. Why? Because their young son was going to that school. They didn't want to move. Now, isn't that the kind of experience you'd want as well? So that's why when you focus on properties with strong owner-occupier demand, you'll get the right type of tenants as well. Mind you, that property rose in value considerably because it met the criteria I'm talking about, stronger owner-occupier demand versus the available supply. So when you align your purchase with what owner-occupiers in that area want, you don't just secure stronger long-term growth, you also make it easier to get it rented out, and you also often have longer-term tenants. So before you buy any property, always ask yourself, is this the kind of property owner-occupiers in this suburb are fighting for? Maybe you're not looking to sell, but you want to make sure that you're buying the type of property that will attract buyers both now and in the future, because that's what's going to give you maximum equity growth. And then you ask, will this property also be attractive to tenants because it meets real demand? Now, if the answer is yes, odds are you're buying into the kind of property that builds true wealth, not just looks good on the surface. So how do you know if a property has strong owner-occupier demand? Well, a lot of people get this wrong. They just focus on buying in a good suburb and they forget to look at the specific features that matter in that particular suburb. They assume all houses or all apartments will perform the same. Well, here's what I can tell you. Even within Australia, we're not the biggest country in the world, but still different things are important to different people in different areas. In Sydney, for example, people will pay an absolute premium to be close to a train station or a metro. But in Brisbane, they really couldn't care less. In the second half of last year, the state government decided to trial 50 cents train fares in Brisbane, 50 cents for any train fare, no matter how far you would travel. And guess what happened? They still struggled to fill their trains. Now, if they did something like that in Sydney, as one of my clients said, who's from Indian background, they said it would be like trains back in India of old. People would sit on top of the trains, they'd hang off the side bars. They wouldn't care about a seat. They'd take the train because 50 cents was unheard of. That's the difference between locals living in Sydney versus locals living in Brisbane. If you take a Sydney mindset to go and buy in Brisbane, you're going to get it wrong. You're going to buy either the wrong type of property or in the wrong pocket of a particular area, and then you'll not get the capital growth that you truly deserve. So when you're looking to buy in an area, you need to focus on the mindset of the locals. And yes, proximity to public transport is a key thing to look at. How desirable is it? But here are some of the other things you need to focus on. Number one, the right land size. I see so many people say, oh, we want to buy the biggest land size possible. Now, sometimes that's a good thing. In certain areas around the country, if you're buying a property, you want to be buying property with land sizes of 500 square meters or above, because that's what suits the lifestyle of the locals living in that particular area. Other times though, it's the smaller land sizes that are more in demand. Maybe you're choosing a particular suburb where most families, they don't want to spend their weekends mowing lawns, so they prefer a smaller land size. What about the number of bedrooms? Should you buy a 3-bedroom house or a 4-bedroom house? Answer, it depends on what the locals want. Certain areas, a 3-bedroom house is totally fine. Other areas, it has to be a 4-bedroom house. If you buy a 3-bedroom house, you will struggle to get the right tenant and your capital growth will be compromised. Now, of course, there are some commonalities though as well across the areas around Australia. For example, you want to buy property that isn't going to give you any hassles. Sure, you also want to make sure you avoid flood zones, bushfire zones, or busy streets. Now, that's the common criteria that everyone will think about, but that's not enough. You need to go one level deeper. That's why you can't just buy a property based on some free data online, or you think, hey, my friend said this area is rising in value, so I'm going to buy a property there. What if you end up buying the wrong type of property for that particular area? You need to know what's happening on the ground. You need to drill into what features buyers in that area actually want. That way, you protect yourself from buying a property that sits on the market, grows slowly, or struggles to attract the right tenants. And look, if you're ready to take the next step, don't just try to figure this all out on your own like Jenny did the first time. Book a free call with us today and take the proven passive investor approach. We'll walk you through how to apply this system so you can find the right property in the right area with the least amount of stress. You can book a no obligation call using the link in the description below. But even with the right property type, many investors still trip up, not because of what they buy, but because of how they invest. In fact, I see people lose tens of thousands of dollars every year from the same repeat errors. That's why in this next video, I break down the 5 expensive mistakes investors keep making and how you can avoid every single one of them. Go watch that now.